All right, welcome back to the Business Exit and Acquisition Playbook. I'm Trent Lee. Today, we're diving into due diligence. This is how you protect your money, avoid the ugly surprises that come right before closing, make sure that deals don't fall apart because there are problems that you should have caught or didn't, you may have missed. And so today, I want to introduce you to John. He's my due diligence guy. Anytime any of my buyers or sellers need any type of help with that process, not only due diligence, but tax planning as well on the sell side. And we can have a separate conversation on that. This today will really just be buyer focused due diligence. But John, why don't you just introduce yourself, tell everyone where you're from, a little bit background.
Yes, thanks, Trent. My name is John Sanfilippo. I'm with Reader CPA Group. I'm a partner at the firm here. I run our M&A division, so I help spearhead the team, make sure we're helping with all the due diligence and helping the buyers understand what to look for and really when to look for it inside of a deal. I'm located here in Orlando, but we are a national firm. We have offices in about 12 different locations right now throughout the country. We're really set up to help people in all different shapes and sizes from a geographic perspective.
Yeah, perfect. So a lot of these buyers that are listening to this are going through for the very first time. Just let's start with the basics. What is due diligence? Why does it matter? Why is it important? High level, what should they be aware of when someone talks about due diligence? What are they really talking about here?
Yeah. So I think the best way to approach it is that you're buying a business and you're putting trust in that individual who owns the business and their bookkeeper and their accountant that the numbers that are being reported are accurate. What we always recommend is that it's great to have trust in them, but you also should go get a second opinion. Just make sure that one plus one actually equals two, right? It's not that they were changing stuff on QuickBooks or they're changing stuff on their bank accounts and moving money left around. Make sure that everything that's being reported inside of the business that you're looking to buy is actually happening. So I think that's really what due diligence is for us. And then we start expanding and saying, from a projections perspective, is the business on track for, let's say, 2025 end of year, like they're projecting? Is the business growing at the same rate that they're representing that it is? And a lot of times, I would say the businesses are very accurate. What we do find, though, is sometimes there's some questions that get brought up about the numbers that maybe when you first just looked at the P&L statement, that wouldn't have come up.
Yeah, I always tell my buyers, trust the numbers that you get from the seller, the broker to make your offer non-binding, get into due diligence, and then verify everything in the due diligence period. And that's really the approach to take. You can't verify everything ahead of time. Buyers are not going to hand over all their bank statements and their tax returns and their POS statements before an offer. So you got to trust what they're providing. And then if in the due diligence period you can't verify it, then you can amend the offer, you can cancel the offer, you can back out, you can do whatever at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and it's a great point. It's something that we find that a lot of deals change dramatically, whether it's valuations, whether it's the offer that you want to make, like you mentioned, or just that, hey, what's going on with this bookkeeper? And do we not like the work that their bookkeeper is doing? And you know what? We need to fire that person and get someone new in to help us
Yeah.
going forward with the business.
Through due diligence, like from, let's say the buyer makes an offer, what do they typically ask for? Often, when I'm working with buyers, I'll provide them a generic list of, hey, if I were buying the business, here's what I'd want to see, but just high level. I know it depends on industry and the size of deal, but high level, what should they come to expect in the due diligence period? Documents that should be requested and documents that you'll be using to verify and back into the data.
Sure. I think that the basic starting point for every deal has to be balance sheets, profit and loss statements or P&Ls. You need bank statements for a lengthy period. I would say 1 to 2 years, right? Is probably good enough for the most deals that we see. You're going to want to see pay stubs or a payroll report to make sure that the owners are actually taking out the compensation that they are describing. Any tax returns for the business, right? So if it's an S corp or a C corp, take a look at those tax returns, and then those are the basic documents that we would want to see to start off with, because every one of those has to match up perfectly. And if they don't, then that brings up a bigger question that we should probably look into further.
Yeah, one thing that's always helpful as well is if a broker's done their job, they should also have a decently easy to read add back schedule to see What adjustments have they made on the profit and loss statements or the tax returns? And ideally, there shouldn't be any real like weird add backs. Like we're not adding back their trip to Disneyland. They put under cost of goods sold. We're adding back
Yeah.
interest, depreciation, owner's wages, some basic customary add backs that a lender's gonna not really push back on.
Sure. Yep.
Tell me a little bit about when it comes to hiring someone to help with due diligence. I don't know if the right word is levels of due diligence, but there's quality of earnings, there's quality of earnings light, there's proof of cash. Just hit on a little bit. What are the differences there? And when is it appropriate to use one versus the other?
No, it's a great question because I think there are different levels, right? And I think it doesn't mean in our mind, if you go with a QoE Light or a very simple proof of cash or a very simple due diligence, it doesn't mean that you're sacrificing quality, right? So I think that's a big distinction. We don't recommend our clients to do a QoE Light just because we want to give the cheap option. What we're looking at is the level of due diligence, the amount of reporting and time that has to get spent into to do a full report is hours on hours, and it will probably cost you $25,000. And if you're buying a business for 300 or a $500,000, you may not want to spend that much money on a due diligence report that maybe is not needed. Or another example of a deal we just worked on actually is that a business was open for less than 12 months. So the level of due diligence that was even possible on a deal like that was very difficult because all the numbers were so new. The trends were young in the business life. I think when we talk about QoE Light, quality of earnings light, or proof of cash light, it might be doing a report where maybe we're only looking at a defined period of time. So maybe we're only looking at 1 quarter or 1 year worth of proof of cash instead of 5 or 6 years worth of proof of cash. So I think it's making sure that you're finding a deal that matches the size of your purchase relative to the quality that you're getting out of the report that can help you put together a proper offer to know that you're on the right track.
Yeah, that's helpful. I know it ranges based on complexity, but give just a general price range. General range for quality of earnings light, not that their quality is any different, but just the amount of reporting or proof of cash. What should someone basically plan for if they're wanting to do due diligence on a business, let's call it under $1 million? What does that look like?
Yeah, I would say those deals are going to range somewhere between $3,000 to $5,000. That's typically what we've seen over the last 12 months. Sometimes a little bit higher, sometimes a little bit lower, but that's where we've seen the hours that are needed. Again, it's also not just the initial report, but then it's also the follow up on it. We walk the clients through what do we see, what don't we see. We give them a written summary as well. And then a lot of times there'll be follow up questions. And what we never want to get into we never want to have a back and forth with clients on is, okay, now every time you talk to us, now the clock is turning, right? You have to start paying us almost like a meter in a cab. We want to avoid that. So we try to price out a deal where now we'll help you through the finish line to get the deal done.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Let's talk about timing. If someone comes to you and says, I got 7 days left in due diligence, is that doable? Do you need more time than that? Obviously, I'm teasing you a little bit
Yeah.
here, but yeah.
No, typically the answer is going to depend on the size of the deal, right? And also what is going on in our world behind the scenes, right? So we have a team behind me that helps with the due diligence, that helps perform it. So we have some scalability opportunities, but it really just depends. You're going to ask us to look at it 24 months worth of bank statements in 72 hours. And as a part of those 7 days, there's a weekend involved. It could be tough. On the flip side of that, what we really would like to have is a full week to a week and a half to do the due diligence. And then we want to have time to speak about it because here's the thing. A great example of this happened with a client that we worked on where we gave them a bunch of due diligence. We had questions on what we saw on the deal. They went back to the buyer. The buyer got their bookkeeper involved, set up a meeting to explain us what was going on. That led to more questions. And you see the effect here. That wouldn't have potentially been able to happen in 7 days. So I would say as soon as you put your offer in, that's when we want to try to get involved in the deal to start looking at due diligence, not just to make our life easier, but for you as a buyer to allow you more time to digest the information and not feel rushed.
So if a buyer plans for 21 to 30 days roughly for due diligence and get you guys involved fairly early, that seems like it'd be a reasonable period of time.
Yeah, because it just gives them time to also digest what we're saying and go back to the buyer with questions. Because there's always going to be some question in some capacity.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I don't know if this is part of due diligence. You'll have to tell me. It's almost a personal question as much as anything else, why I'm asking. But do you guys calculate debt service coverage ratio at all when do you back into, okay, the buyers agreed to this purchase price, the adjusted cash flow, the SDE, EBITDA is this, or do you simply just look at, here's what the profit and loss statements say, can we back into that? And then it's up to the buyer to determine, is that price worth it?
So we do get involved on those deals. And then also on top of that, we actually have a gentleman on our team whose sole job is to do a lot of the projecting of businesses as well. So we'll look at it and say, okay, talk about financing. We're looking at the finances. Can we project to make sure that the business can qualify for a loan? That's a big thing. So we'll get involved with that. We'll get involved in actual value of businesses. Now, we look at valuations in two ways. We have what we call soft valuation, which is very simple. It's very accurate for what it is, but it's not like an official document that you would go from a valuation perspective. But we do have a third party that we have access to that can do those full on documents for clients that need it. But we'll look at those valuations just to say, hey, based on the numbers here, are you getting a good deal like you described? Or the buyer wants X and we don't see a place where you should be paying more than Y? You've got to make a decision now on what you want to do.
Yeah, it's like that charter school that we did a while ago, a number of months ago.
Great
The
example. Yeah.
valuation came back. It just was too high. The numbers just honestly didn't work. Once we really got into the details and we had to go back and say, look, here's where the numbers do work. And then it's up to the buyer and seller to agree to that. Ultimately, they didn't. And the deal fell apart. But it saved the buyer from overpaying for a business that was claiming to make more money than it really was.
Exactly. And I think that's a great example of just due diligence across the board, where it wasn't just going to the buyer and saying, hey, this isn't a good deal. It was, here's how we can structure a deal to make this work for you, to help you get this business that you want. That charter school, they had a great vision, right? So I think that's where we want to try to be a partner in a deal. We don't want to just be someone that just comes in and says, no, it's not a good deal, don't buy it. It's okay. If you want this business, this is how you can structure it to make it work. And then especially if you start adding debt financing and you start adding the tax structure, because again, that's a big part of these deals, because sometimes the business is going to change a tax structure after the deal is done.
Yeah. What are some red flags buyers need to look out for in due diligence?
I think the big thing that's come up recently is cash, right? So business that accept cash, how is that cash being reported and where is it being reported on their P&L statement, on their balance sheet? It might sound fairly obvious that most people think it's just going to go into a bank and then it's going to get documented that way. But we've seen some pretty wacky things on where that's being reported and where it's not being reported on deals. I think another red flag is businesses that have negative revenues, especially if they go past, let's say, the previous 12 months. So negative profit and losses on a monthly basis. Now we're 12 months later and the business looks like it's booming. But just 12 months ago, there were 2 or 3 negative months. So I think you want to look at those trends. And then it doesn't mean that it's a deal that you don't buy. It's, can we identify the why? Why are those businesses in a negative on those months? Is it poor ownership? Is it crazy things happen because of COVID or something along those lines? Whatever it may be. I think those are probably the two biggest red flags that we would tell people to look out for on a regular basis.
Okay. Yeah, that's fantastic. What about, is there anyone else on the due diligence team that they need to be aware of? Let's say they hire you, you'll go through all the financial due diligence. Is there anything else, any part of due diligence that you guys don't cover that a buyer needs to be aware of or plan for?
I would say probably not. If there's something that's missing, then maybe, but I would say we'll cover almost everything from A to Z. And then, like I said, if there is something that is needed that we don't do internally, have the outsource approved vendors that we've vetted for clients to make sure that they're getting the right fit. We have the gentleman that does the projections from a financing perspective, right? He's an outside vendor who works per diem with us to make sure he helps us with those clients. About the business valuations for people that need an official valuation, we've got that outside vendor. Across the board between internal and external vetted team members, I think we've got everyone covered.
Yeah, fantastic. Anything else you think a first-time buyer needs to know about how to prepare going into due diligence to have it go as smooth as possible that we haven't talked about?
When you're going into due diligence for the first time, it's just be open-minded that things are going to come up that you don't like. And I think that's a big thing. It's a big emotional change for most people, especially if they've never owned a business before. People run businesses different ways, right? You may run your business different than I do, Trent, right? Everyone's a little bit different. So understanding that you may want to do something different, it doesn't mean that makes it a bad deal. It just, you need to understand why they do it, what did they do, and is it being reported accurately? If it's been reported accurately, then when you buy the business, you can go change that. So I think that's a big thing that is a part of the due diligence conversation that we have. Is there's a lot of why questions as to why did they do this? Why do you think they did that? And some of it is just, hey, I don't know the reason why their accountant or their bookkeeper did what they did. It's not the way we would do it, but here's how we would fix it for you going forward. And it's just, as long as the numbers are accurate, then I think you can move past a lot of those things.
Yeah, that's fantastic. All right. Any last parting advice that you want to share, or how would someone, if they want to reach out to you and get in contact with you, have you help due diligence? How do they contact you?
Yeah. So anyone who wants us to help, reach out to me at john@readerscpagroup.com or my LinkedIn profile as well. You can go to our website, readerscpagroup.com, and just reach out to us. And we're happy to help with any due diligence questions that you have, or even if you're interested in potentially doing due diligence, just reach out to us. Let's have a conversation with myself and the team, and let's see if it's the right fit for you.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Trent.